Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Nazar Labunets with Ataccama, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Deep Srivastava, SVP Head of AI and Digital Transformation at Franklin Templeton. Welcome, Deep. Just today, I was just scrolling through LinkedIn and I saw something like Gen AI is just the UI.
Mhm.
So, and I think that's kind of the same idea. It's kind of democratizes, like makes it easier, like the application of AI into like everyday tasks, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it acts like the UI. It allows that engagement that was not there in the past. You really had to go through a lot of complex processes. That engagement becomes so much more seamless, and then it allows the cross collaboration. So, uh, so yeah, I think Gen AI starts to have a it. I have seen it starting to break down silos in a pretty meaningful way.
That's interesting. Can you give an example? You did mention like connections between different decision making, bodies or contexts. So can you give an example of that? How it breaks down silos and connects people or systems more?
So say for example, if you were working on trying to improve any of the operational processes, right? So what you would typically do is you get a set of data. You're trying to then analyze, compare two different reports, and so on, right? So the reports may be coming from two different sources. They may have completely different because they have their own usage. What would you do in the past? In the past, if you had to really connect two different sources of information to make a decision, you would have to get all the data together in one place, right? And that's the way you always think about it. And then the humans had to have it in a very structured way together to say, okay, what does this decision make? But now a human can go in, interact with one report, say, this is what I'm thinking about, uh, go on a console, and then say, okay, this is what my next question is going to be. So they went and extracted information which was sitting in two completely different silos, sitting right on your console, and you're able to get them together. That kind of a power would not exist in the past, right? So that's where decision makers can start connecting their silos, and that can happen at a very small operational tactical level. It can also happen at a very strategic level.
Mhm. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, that's a nice example. Let's talk about, the importance of data quality and the data governance, for AI, for Gen AI, for ML models, for all kinds of, applications that we can think of. Like, what's top of your mind on this topic?
So now that you bring up an important point, and I think that's why, while back to what I said in the beginning, that while a lot of these opportunities are there, it's very important to be aware of what can go wrong, right? And data quality is a critical component of that, right? Now,
Mm,
for all of us who have been in the data space, we've always worried about data quality. But think about how much more important it becomes now versus in the past. In the past, when a human is making a decision, you get some data, you get some output. Based on that, you're making a decision, right? If something looks wrong, you go and talk to a few people, or you push back on what that information was, make sure that something has gone wrong in the system. You can collect all of that information, right? So there were a lot of these implicit controls that used to exist. A challenge in an AI world is that you got a system that you can extract this information. That information may be getting fed into another AI system. Another kind of decision may happen over there that may be fed into a third system. So a lot of these interconnections that we talked about, while they are powerful in breaking down the silos, they also significantly amplify the impact of what can go wrong, right?
mm,
And that makes data governance, data management so much more important than what it used to be in the past. Um, and more important, you need systems which can then flag where things can go significantly wrong. So, you need a lot more of those advanced capabilities where you're saying that, you need a lot more of trend monitoring, trying to control these problems right at the source.
mm,
Um, and so my guess is that the implication of this on a data management will just continue to rise.
mm. Very interesting. I see. And it seems to me that this is like very much connected to Gen AI, what you just mentioned, how improper, inaccurate information can skew results, can distort, reality and answers and decision making. What about, or is that applicable to other areas of AI as well for you?
I think it's applicable to other areas equally, because again, as I said, a lot of those decisions, they don't happen purely in terms of unstructured data. They are also happening with the structured data, right? Now, the only benefit or the leg up is that on the structured data, the industries had been working on data management techniques for years, right? So you have a lot more capabilities that exist and they are much more mature on that side. But you will still have the challenge that there's a lot of data and you're making those decisions and something is going wrong in that space, right? So the level of errors in the structured side and their impact continues to go up. Thankfully, you have the right technologies. We just need to double down on them if you don't have as an enterprise enough, or as you continue to acquire more data. But then, yes, on the unstructured side, um, they are much more significant because unstructured data by its nature has its own challenges, right? And then Gen AI is a technology. I think as we've seen hallucinations and those kind of problems come up a lot, which have kind of become a big word. But what you effectively understand is that it doesn't work. There is a certain probability by which you will see some of those outcomes happen. So there's a lot of chances of things going wrong. So how do you tame that? That work has increased. More important, the capability set of how do you manage that risk is not mature yet. People are still figuring out what the implications would be. People are still figuring out how exactly to manage bias, right? So those technologies are not there yet. So that evolution will take its own time, just the way it happened in this case of the structured data.
Right, I see. And you managed to know that some capabilities are important, and you managed monitoring data, let's say on the source level. What other capabilities are important, to assure high quality data for AI, or just AI accuracy, right? Reliability.
So I think the other big part of this is what I would call as the explainability side. Because what happens is that when the decisions and the tasks were more human oriented, then it was possible to have a good understanding of why certain decisions are happening, or there was always, someone who could point out to what those reasons were. When you get into AI systems, they become big pretty quickly. So how do you know who has made the decision? Why has those decisions been made? You need a lot of that understanding. And if there are changes in the decisions, are they because underlying data changed, or is it simply because the models are pointing to something new? So ability to see into those systems and really understand what's going on, that becomes a challenge, right? And you don't want to be in a space where we do not have the right oversight. So we spent a significant amount of effort in how exactly are we monitoring the output, how can we monitor the intermediate steps, how can we create an explanation of those decisions, creating the transparency around it. Those elements are the crucial ones, and I think that part is significantly shooting up. um, kind of related to that is the whole issue of bias in the data, or about the way, the bias in the underlying data then showing up in what the output could look like. So those are the areas where strong oversight mechanisms, making sure that technology teams come together with the subject matter experts and build the right oversight. I think those, uh, that focus has significantly grown.
So it seems that what you mentioned is something that could be called AI governance, right? How do we want to monitor? How do we want to feed, etc. Right? Right. And are there any specific technologies, and I don't mean vendors, that are key for you to assure, that governance, that tracking, monitoring of AI models?
Yeah, so I think to your point, the tracking mechanisms are developing at multiple levels. And back to your point, without getting into the vendors and so on. But a lot of it, let's start with some of the basics like outlier detection. Outlier detection is a significant capability that has a huge impact, and that will continue to grow. That is the part we actually tend to be most focused on because, you know, obviously, when you say that these systems are working good, you're always looking at the core numbers and the averages and how much improvement is coming in. But you've got to be super focused on what can go wrong on the extremes, on the edges, as an example. So new capabilities are emerging on that side that allows you to stay on top of those very well. A lot on stress testing, scenario testing, right? So because that's another way. You don't want to do those outliers and that monitoring only in production systems, right? So before you launch something, have you been able to really test out those scenarios? Have you been able to bring up the right scenarios? So how do you even create those scenarios itself becomes a job. It may oftentimes require synthetic data to be created, right? Not just what you have seen historically, because historical data the systems get trained on, but you never know what the new problem sets tend to be, right? So outlier detection and monitoring, creating of the synthetic data, simulations, stress testing, all of those areas are becoming significant, much more significant today than before.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Deep, for joining me today. And please visit cdomagazine.tech for more interviews. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Nazar. Appreciate the time.